Good evening, everyone. My name is Dan Birchie. I'm the Associate Director of the France Chicago Center, and it's my great pleasure to invite all of you here to what promises to be a really magical evening. And by all of you here, of course, I mean everyone in this room, but I also mean all of you joining us virtually, those of you participating in Marianne.Midwest gatherings in Central Illinois, Wisconsin, Missouri, Indiana, and Michigan. Thanks all of you for joining us. Bienvenue à tous. In a moment, I'll introduce tonight's discussant and moderator, Jennifer Wild, who will introduce our distinguished guest. But before I do, I wanted to mention already that at some point during the evening, Jennifer is going to open up the floor to questions from the audience. And when she does, those of you joining us virtually, that's your cue to submit your questions via the online tool that we created for this purpose. And those questions will appear on Jennifer's laptop. And those of you in this room, raise your hand and wait for a microphone to come your way. And once you have the microphone, ask your question into the microphone. Even if you're up close and think you're have a pretty heavy voice, wait for the microphone, or else the people listening coming via the internet won't be able to hear the question. Also, after this event is over, I would invite you to a reception, which is taking place right over here outside on the second floor lobby. You exit the door, take a right and another right and a left. Finally, a word of thanks to all the organizations who made this event possible: the France Chicago Center, the Cultural Services at the Consulate of France in Chicago, and especially Tanguy, Marine, and Laurence, the Film Studies Center, especially Jennifer and her wonderful, Julia Gibbs and her fine staff, the Logan Center for the Arts, Music Box Films, Chicago International Film Festival, French Club, Doc Films, the Alliance Française, and the Marianne.Midwest Network. So introducing our distinguished guest tonight and the person who will be engaging him in discussion, as well as moderating the Q&A, is Jennifer Wild. Jennifer is an associate professor in the departments of Cinema and Media Studies and Romance Languages and Literatures. And she's also a faculty director of the France Chicago Center. Jennifer's research and teaching focus not only on the history and theory of modern art and film, but also, more broadly speaking, on French cultural history, visual culture, and the political life of film and art forms. Her book, published by the University of California Press, is entitled The Parisian Avant-Garde in the Age of Cinema, 1900 to 1923. So everyone welcome Jennifer Wild.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Dan, for the introduction. And welcome to this exciting Marianne.Midwest event with the director, François Ozon. I want to also thank many people here quickly, the French Embassy in Chicago, the Cultural Services of the French Embassy in Chicago, for the invitation to lead this conversation with Monsieur Ozon, the Film Studies Center and the staff. But most importantly, I want to thank the folks at Music Box Films, the Chicago-based distribution company that is responsible for bringing Monsieur Ozon's new film, By the Grace of God, to the United States. Smaller independent distribution companies like Music Box Films, which have a specific commitment to distributing foreign and independent films, are absolutely essential to building and maintaining a healthy international cinematic ecosystem in America. So my sincere thanks to Music Box Films and also its partner, Music Box Theater, one of Chicago's most important independent cinemas for accessing films like By the Grace of God. So that's my hurrah for our Chicago-based distribution and theatrical space for great cinema. So on that note, I want to warmly welcome Monsieur Ozon to the City of Chicago, the University of Chicago, and the Film Studies Center here at the university. His 2019 film that we are going to primarily discuss tonight, By the Grace of God, is the winner of a Silver Bear at this year's Berlin International Film Festival. But this is not, of course, Monsieur Ozon's first award for filmmaking. Indeed, his critical recognition began as he began his career as a filmmaker. For example, in 1996, his early short film, A Summer Dress, took home the French Grand Prize at the Brest European at the European Short Film Festival in Brest. While in 1997, the film also received the Audience Award at the Los Angeles Outfest, or the important LGBTQ film festival that also awarded the Grand Jury Prize for Outstanding Foreign Narrative Feature to Ozon's 1999 film Les Amants Criminels, or Criminal Lovers. The following year, New York's LGBT Film Festival awarded Ozon's Water Drops on Burning Rocks, an adaptation of a play by Rainer Werner Fassbinder, the prize for Best Feature Film. A few years later, in 2003, he won the prize for Best Director for his 2002 film 8 Women at the French Lumière Awards, while his film Swimming Pool went on to be named Best Film at the Bangkok World Film Festival that same year. Now, I could go on and give you more detail about both nominations and awards, but I focus on these early wins, in part because they frame the important recognition Ozon has received for being a groundbreaking director of films that, in a most daring and stylistically diverse fashion, explore the joy, pain, banality, and complexity of love, intimacy, eroticism, sexuality, and gender, among many other things. As a member of what film critics and film historians dub the new wave of French film directors who emerged in the 1980s and 1990s, Ozon quite possibly developed his approach to these topics, perhaps not, but got his foothold in filmmaking while studying with one of the best known and most important directors of the first generation of the new wave. That would be Eric Rohmer, and he studied with Rohmer at the Sorbonne. After his studies at the Sorbonne with Rohmer, he did indeed study filmmaking at the renowned filmmaking school La Fémis in Paris. But whatever he may have learned in school or with studying with such a great master such as Rohmer, a great master of modernist films, Ozon's early awards demonstrate that his style of film authorship cannot be contained to any one film genre or mode of storytelling or production. Ozon, for example, works seamlessly between small-budget and independent films such as Under the Sand, starring the remarkable Charlotte Rampling, and with whom he also worked more recently in Young and Beautiful. But he's also equally comfortable with big budget and far more commercial films, such as 8 Women. In this film, which won the Reader Jury Prize at the Berlin International Film Festival, I might say that Ozon dared to work with a quite incredible and intimidating cast of French actresses that spanned the decades of French film history. From the younger actresses Virginie Ledoyen and Ludivine Seigné, to the modern divas Emmanuelle Béard, Fanny Ardant, and Isabelle Huppert, to the incomparable Catherine Deneuve, and the 1930s film star Danielle Darrieux, I believe Ozon established himself with 8 Women as one of the most important directors of women, of strong, complicated, liberated, and sensual, but also often imperfect, broken, or at times psychologically complex, and at times psychologically complex female characters. So I could say far more about the breadth and diversity of Ozon's film style, the subtle and not so subtle themes that can be charted across his cinematic oeuvre and that traverse his comedies, psychological dramas and thrillers, melodramas, and historical costume dramas, such as in his 1916 German language film France, that, with gorgeous black and white cinematography, tells a complicated tale about personal and national reconciliation in the post-World War I period. But as I conclude my introduction, I simply want to point out that Ozon has continued to be a director who dares to take enormous risks in order to make the kinds of films he wants to make. Sometimes these risks have garnered harsh criticism about how he's filmed the female body, for example, as was the case when his 2013 film Young and Beautiful debuted at Cannes. And at other times, his risks in storytelling have provoked serious legal action and near censorship, as is the case with By the Grace of God, when the real-life priest at the center of the film sought to stop the film's release on the grounds that it would prejudice his court case. But beyond this dramatic legal fight, in By the Grace of God, Ozon risks extend once again to the areas of sexuality, gender, and this time sexual violence. One of the great risks is in openly telling the story of boys' sexual abuse and how that experience renders men from all walks of life broken, physically and emotionally challenged, and, in Ozon's own words, fragile. While we may not think of male or masculine fragility as the most risky of all topics, I think it is, especially when we recognize, as Ozon I think does, that visually witnessing suffering and emotions on a big screen are still primarily associated with the female gender and the female experience. I'm going to begin my discussion with Ozon on this topic, but first I ask you to give him a most hearty welcome to the University of Chicago.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Julia, I don't think this is working yet. Hello? Okay. Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for agreeing to have this conversation that that fortunately we can have across state lines and beyond this room. So I'm curious to start out, what did you think of this notion that male fragility is a risky topic?
I don't think it's a risky topic.
I think your microphone went off again.
I don't think
Aha.
it's a risky topic. It was a new topic for me because as you said, I've made many films about women, about strong women, and maybe it was easier during a long time to make a film about women because I had more distance. But for the first time, I wanted to focus only on men. Maybe because I felt mature enough to be able to look at the suffer of men. And so I was looking for a subject on this topic. And by chance, one day I discovered on internet the testimonies of some survivors, people who were abused by a priest when they were a child. And I was very moved by their testimony. So I decided to meet them, especially Alexander. I don't know if you saw the film. Some people saw the film here? Yes? Okay. So I met Alexander, who was a very Catholic man and who trusted the institution of the church. And he came to my office with a big folder with all the exchanges, all the emails he had with the church, and he said to me, "Do what you want with that." So it was great to have all this material. And then at this moment started a kind of investigation and some research about all the story. I discovered that there was a kind of relay race with different men who were involved in this story, and it began like this.
So when you say relay race, what do you
Yes,
mean?
relay race, un passage de bâton.
Sure, sure, but
It
can you
doesn't exist in
explain?
English.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
No. Oh,
I
okay.
just mean, like, what do you mean in this context, that there was
Um,
an exchange between
Because
the
the
survivors?
reality was very surprising because Alexander first began alone, the fight, to make to come out with the reality of what really happened. And he discovered when he was 40 years old that the priest who abused him was still alive and he was still close to children. So it was a big shock for him. But in terms of law, the statute of limitation at this time in France were 20 years after your majority. So it was impossible for him first to go to the police. So he decided to cope with the institution, to speak with the cardinal, and to try to stop this priest being with children.
So
And
the age of majority in France is
18.
18, like in the United
18.
States.
So until 38,
Mhm.
you had the possibility to denounce an abuse. But now the law has changed. Now it's 30 years.
Right.
And doing this research and working on all the process of Alexander in the church, I realized some other people worked after on that because after 2 years, when he understood that the church won't change and they will do nothing about this priest, he decided to go to the justice and to the police, and then an investigation began, and the policeman discovered some other victims, and especially the character of François, who is the second character of the film,
Right.
because his parents, when he was young, try to stop already the priest, and then there was a kind of relay race between these two men, because
I see.
Francois, when he discovered that the priest was still alive, started a big mess. I don't know how to explain that, but to move things with the media, and he created the association, and then after some other victims arrived.
Right. This is such a it's so fascinating because I'm sitting here and it's as though I'm watching the film again. You know, you stay so true to exactly this narrative that you just told me. But I keep thinking about that folder that you just
Yes.
described with the pages of emails and the pages of letters. And we see Alexandre in the movie write letters, and you have a voiceover very
Yes.
often of writing the letters and composing the letters and the relay race of letters.
Yes.
It's almost an epistolary
Yes.
film at some in the beginning
Yes.
between
It
the
was a risk.
that was how why was that a risk?
But it's a risk because it's not usual to hear so much voiceover in a film, especially today. And my first idea, actually, when I discovered the folder, was to make a play, because it would have been perfect in theater. And but I'm not a play director,
Playwright or
so I forgot it. And after, the second idea was to make a documentary, because I met all these survivors, and I was very touched by their story and by themselves. I thought they were incredible. They were like heroes. So I wanted to film them, you know. And very fast I realized they were upset and they were disappointed, because if they gave me so many secrets, so much intimacy, it was because I was the director of fiction, and they were waiting from me fiction. Because when I met them, the film Spotlight was just released in
Right.
France, and it was very successful. So they were waiting a kind of French Spotlight, which is not exactly the film.
Right.
But they
right.
wanted to become American heroes, you know, to have actors playing their part. And in a certain way, it was a way for them to turn the page. Because as you see in the film, it was so disturbing, all this intimacy, to speak out, to say what happened in their family, all these kind of things. So it's the last relay race with me.
Right. So the process of going from, you know, an encounter with these men, first your discovery, then the encounter with these men, then this dossier, this folder, to the idea of a play, to the idea of a documentary, to then the idea of a fiction. We won't call it fiction, but it's
Fiction documentée.
yeah, fiction, documented fiction, or what is the how does it say on the screen? It's a,
Basé sur des faits réels, based
voilà,
on true events.
exactly based on true events.
But I had to put that because of the lawyers.
Okay.
I didn't want to put that in the
I
film.
see.
I had no
Interesting. Yeah,
choice.
you had no choice.
Without that, the film was forbidden, so I had to put it.
But it's so interesting then about the desire of the survivors, as we should call them, to want to see this as not to see themselves represented and not to see themselves, and that this was a, you know, almost like a gesture, a risk that you took in order to
Yes.
actually help their process.
Yes, they were very clever, and they knew the power of cinema, because the film changed many things in France. So at this moment, I didn't know. You know, I didn't know I was making a political film,
Right.
because it had many effects on the reality.
Do you want to talk about some of the effects of the film?
Yes.
Would you please?
Yes. After the release of the film, the priest was defrocked, and he's still not judged. Huh? He will be judged next year.
Okay.
So it's quite surprising, because usually the church wait from the judgment of human before the canonic judgment.
Right.
And the Cardinal Barbarin was condemned, and so I don't say it's because of the film, but I think it helped a lot, and because the film was very mediatized, very supported by the press, and it was very successful, and many Catholics came to see the film. So I think it changed actually something.
Well, and what's so interesting to me too is, first of all, it's based in Lyon, which is it's a very Catholic city. It's a city with almost a more conservative relationship to religion still than, say, Paris. And so there's so much in this film about the grip of the national religion, right? And I think it's still the national religion of France. No.
Yes, of
Yeah.
course.
So Catholicism. So Catholics came out to see this film, and Catholics became especially interested in this film.
I think many Catholics are upset and angry about this
Mm-hmm.
situation because, the pedophilia has nothing to do with the Catholic religion.
Right.
Is some priest who use the power of the religion to become pedophile, and
Mm-hmm.
so I think many Catholics want to change this situation,
Sure.
and they are waiting something for the hierarchy, and it doesn't happen. For example, Barbarin, after being condemned, went to the Vatican to propose his resignation to the Pope Francis, and he refused it. So it was again a big scandal because people didn't understand, especially the Catholics, because the words don't follow the acts
Yeah.
don't follow the words of the Pope, who always said zero tolerance for pedophilia.
So, and what I'm trying to do is triangulate this idea of, you know, violence, sexual violence, the church, um, and filmmaking, right? In the sense that you said, I've made a political film, and so have you ever considered yourself a political filmmaker? Or was this something that just happened, of course, by force of the topic and by force of
I
the
don't know what it
realism?
means, political director. I think if for me, I don't make films with answers. You have seen the film. The last sentence is a question. I'm here to asking questions. I don't have the answer. If I would have the answer, I would be a politician. So as an artist, I think you have to show the complexity
Mm-hmm.
of human being, and that's what I tried with this film. For example, with the priest, I try to show his fragility too.
Mm-hmm.
Is part of humanity because he's got one like everybody.
Right.
So I try to show. Of course, I'm in the side of the victims. I'm with them, but I try to show the logic of the church and the institution too.
Mm-hmm. So, but in asking questions and opening
Yes,
up questions, is this not a gesture
of course.
that
Yes,
has a political dynamic? That
yes.
asks an audience to take a position, that you don't tell them the position, but it asks them to take positions.
Yes, I've lived that a very long time ago when I made a short film, Summer Dress,
Yes.
which was for me a very simple film about sexuality, and it became because when it was released, it was the period where AIDS was
Yes.
very important in France, and for the gay, sexuality was so guilty. It
Yes.
was, and this film was very free, very like about pleasure, about love, about sexuality, and the film became a kind of flag for the gay community. But it
Yes.
was not
Yes.
my goal. I was
Sure.
happy of that. So sometimes, you create something and it becomes because of the audience, because of the people, something else. It's great when it can change things.
Right. Right. And that film is it's actually streaming on Netflix. Um,
Which film?
Un robe d'été or
Summer
summer
Dress?
dress.
I
Yes.
didn't know.
It is, and
Okay.
and
I will watch it.
it's a it is
Because
it's
they don't pay me for that.
well, get on it.
Okay.
So no, but it's such a whimsical film. But what does interest me is how freely you do take up queer topics, queer characters.
I
Um,
didn't know it was queer at this time.
well, we didn't call
We
it queer at this time. I'm not sure. Gay. We called it
when
gay.
I came in America, I discovered the word queer
Hmm.
because it comes really from America.
Right. So, but
And
we even in that period, I think we
yes,
would say gay. But this is it's
it
a
was a
comedy.
bisexual movie actually.
It was a bisexual movie,
Bisexual movie.
right? So it's this film. Do you want to give just a little quick summary?
Uh, yes. I have to remember. Yes, it's a story of two boys who are in holidays in the on summer, and or maybe you will
Yes. So
yes,
so. Um,
better than me.
well, what's interesting? I mean, just it's a short film about being on summer vacation, which does seem
Yes.
like a very Romer topic,
Yes.
right? Vacation, and so
The film was released at the same time of the film of Romer Conte d'été.
Aha,
Summer Tale.
Summer Tale, exactly.
And I
Interesting.
remember a critic in Les Cahiers du Cinéma said my short film was better than the Romer's film. And I was so shocked because Romer is a kind of god for me. And I said he's stupid. But because Romer is never very openly sexual, and my film was so sexual,
Right.
so I think this critic preferred.
Well,
that.
so
He was waiting something sexual from Romer.
but also, I mean, the film is filled with joy in the sense that in one of the first opening scenes,
No
we have
guilt.
this-
No guilt.
no guilt, and just pure pleasure and joy. There's a dance scene
Yes.
of the boyfriend, and
With
it's
a
long.
song which was used by Tarantino after. It was Bang
Yes.
Bang.
Yes, exactly. So Tarantino is stealing from you early.
Exactly.
Yes, we knew this. Yes, but basically, the young man meets a young woman on the beach, and we understand he's gay, and
No, he's naked.
oh, he is
He's naked on the beach.
Well, I didn't say
Everybody's
that, but
naked.
everyone's naked on the beach. But he meets a young woman on the beach, and they go and they frolic and make love in the forest.
She proposed.
She does.
She's the one who says,
She's-
"Do you want to come in the woods
She's
with
a
me?"
strong woman who knows
Yes.
what she wants.
Yes.
And so they make love, and someone steals his clothes, so she gives him her dress to wear back to the
It's his
cabin.
first time with a girl.
Correct. So he was right. So this was also an experience for him.
Big experience.
So what's beautiful though too is that he rides his bike. It also reminded me of
He comes back on the beach and his
Clothes
clothes were
stolen.
stolen.
Right.
So the girls say, "I've got a dress. You have to put it if you want to go back to your home." And wearing this dress, he discovers something new, because he had many problems with his boyfriend. But when they come back, they are very excited with the dress.
Yes.
So the dress is a great element to discover your sexuality.
Absolutely. Well, and this scene where he's riding the bicycle with the dress, you know, and there is this almost I felt like some early Truffaut, like
Les Mistons.
Les Mistons. Voilà.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. But it's Marie who's anyway.
It was a girl.
It was a girl, but also in a summer
It's a
dress.
boy with a dress.
It's a boy with a dress. So already you're anticipating so many more complicated topics about gender and sexuality, identity, and that freedom that comes, say, like you say, with just a dress.
Yes.
So back to Romer. I mean, if this is a kind of Romerian film of a sort, because French Vacations. This is a theme.
It's a conte moral, a moral conte. I don't know how to say that in English.
A tale.
A tale, voilà. But it's moral.
Romers.
Moral.
Yes, but Romers.
Romer, oui.
But yours?
Mine?
Yeah.
I think so. There is always a kind of moral, yes,
Yeah.
in it. But a twisted moral.
But a twisted morale. How so?
Yes.
Why is it twisted?
Because it was not usual to see the girl, at this time, you never see a girl cruising a boy, les rôles étaient échangés. Je sais pas comment dire.
Yeah, the roles were inversed. You could
Yes.
change the roles.
Yes.
Yes. So, I mean, would you say that Romer? Well, how was it being Romer's student? Just quickly, I want to talk more about by the grace of God, but quickly.
It was great because I was a big fan of his work, of course, and it was very surprising because you can wait for someone like Romer, who was very intellectual, something very theoric about cinema. It wasn't absolutely not.
Theoretical.
Absolutely not theoretical. It was more about money. He was very mean, so he was obsessed how to make the film the less expensive. It was very much about economy.
Yeah.
But it was very funny because hearing this genius of cinema explaining if you need a carpet for your film, I can tell you where it is the less expensive in Paris. So it was this kind of lessons.
Yes.
It was very funny. And to explain le découpage.
The scenario.
No, the découpage les plans.
Oh yes. Okay.
The frames, the big shot, the shot, American shot. No, not le montage.
Sorry, the découpage.
Le découpage. Size of shot.
Oh yes,
voilà.
the shot size. Thank you.
He showed us a match of tennis between Björk and Connors. I remember.
Okay.
And he began to say it's a close-up. Here it's a close-up. It's a big shot.
I see.
And after 3 minutes, we have understood everything. But we watched all the match because it was great. It was a great match.
And
So
he
it
was
was the only. So
that
it
was
was
his,
so funny. It was
that's
his lesson.
fabulous. So that's
Yes.
fabulous. So he was a tennis enthusiast.
He was a tennis fan.
Yeah, okay.
Because tennis is the sport the most cinematographic
It
in
is.
terms of mise en scène.
So did he show this in class?
Yes.
So
And we
this was
spent
also
2 hours watching a match of tennis, and he stopped talking. It was
I'm going to do this.
yes,
It's brilliant. It's
Yes.
brilliant and cheap.
very cheap.
Very cheap. So so this is fascinating. How, I mean, do you see, I know that it's sometimes not interesting to be asked the question, what's your relationship then to this new wave, to these big directors? I mean, does this have does this weigh on you? Do you think about it? Or because with Un robe d'été or The Summer Dress as the better summer tale by Romer,
Yes.
there's a way that you aren't concerned.
Yes, Nouvelle Vague was very important for all the French directors.
Of course.
For me, I feel very close to Éric Rohmer and Claude Chabrol, more than to Godard or Truffaut.
Okay.
I know the director of my generation are more inspired by Truffaut, and so I was a big fan of them. Uh, Eric Romer, because of his way of working, was very important in terms of production. He adapted always the budget, the economy of the film to what he wanted to make. And Chabrol, how to say that in English? I don't know in French too. Sa boulimie,
Chabrol.
sa boulimie.
Ça?
Sa boulimie, le fait de faire beaucoup de films, the
Ah,
fact
yes.
to make
So
so many
he's
films.
Just, yes, he's just prolific.
Prolific, very prolific, and
kind of twisted.
yes, very twisted, yes.
Yeah.
And the fact to be able to make a commercial movie and after some more artistic movie,
Absolutely.
and always taking risk in his work. So it's something which inspired me.
This is interesting. So it could be fair to teach an Ozon Chabrol class, thinking about the two cinemas together.
But maybe the director who was the most important for me was Fassbinder.
Aha.
When I discovered as a student Fassbinder, it was like if I understood exactly what I wanted to make, because Fassbinder had so many different inspiration. And for me, was inspired by someone like Romer and some other movies. I was a big fan of John Waters. How do you do when you like John Waters and Eric Romer,
Yes.
And when you discover someone like Fassbinder,
Yes.
He's afraid of nothing.
Yeah.
He's able to mix different genres. He's very free in his work.
He's very
And
free.
so it was very helpful when I discover his work.
It's a really interesting collection of filmmakers. I love this. Fassbender plus Chabrol plus Romer plus
John
Waters equals Ozon. But this actually gets me to another question. I mean, By the Grace of God is, I think, by your own words, an inexpensive film. It was not a huge
No, it was
budget.
not very expensive. No,
So
it was impossible to find a lot of money on such a topic. Pedophilia is not very bankable.
It's not sexy, no.
Maybe in Hollywood, but not in France.
But at the same time, I mean, this idea of working under constraints, like Romer, right? That he might have just wanted bargain carpet, but you had to work under constraints. And so, first of all, who did give money, and how then did you think through the budget in relationship to the film you made?
It was quite difficult to find the money for the film because there is a channel which is very important in France called Canal+. And usually they always help my film, they support me. I'm a child of Canal+ in a certain way. And for the first time, they said no.
Interesting.
And so it was very surprising. And we realized the new chief of Canal+, Bolloré, who is famous in France, is very Catholic and very conservative Catholic. And he said, no way, not this kind of movie on our channel. So for the first time, we didn't have the principal finance of the French cinema. So we found some other people, but it was quite disturbing for my producer, and they were brave enough to say, okay, we don't stop and we go on, and this film must happen.
That's
But
actually shocking to me, yeah.
if it wouldn't have been me as a director, the film wouldn't have existed. You know, if it would have been a first feature, it would have been impossible to find the money to make it.
And Arte is another
Arte,
channel that's very important.
Arte, they could have, but they didn't give enough money for this kind of budget.
So then, in having a small budget,
Yes.
clearly
A
this-
normal budget.
normal, but
Normal budget.
smaller than other films. I mean,
Normal budget.
normal budget.
Normal budget. But you know, for example, the actors accepted not to be well paid on the film because they wanted to be involved and they knew we didn't have enough money to pay them as they should have been usually.
Well, and this is another connection to Romer,
Yes.
because your actors.
Because I don't pay well the actors.
Well, this I didn't know.
No. No, Romer did it. Romer.
But the two of the principal actors were acting very very frequently with Romer.
Yes, Melville Poupeau. It's the third time I worked with him. He was in Summertale.
Summer Dress.
No, Summertale.
Oh, pardon.
Conte d'été, the film
Right,
of
he
Romer.
wasn't in your film. He was in.
No, he was
Romer's.
not
Yes,
in my
yes,
short
yes.
film.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
I've made with him Time to Live some years ago. And Bernard Verlet, who was very famous in the 70s, plays the part of the priest,
Yes.
the pedophile priest.
Yeah. Which is a remarkable performance, I have to say.
Yes, it was great. It was very difficult to find the right person for this part. I didn't cast him because he came from Romer, you know.
No.
I cast him because he was perfect during the test, because he was able to come with complexity. You know, when you play a bad guy, it's always easy to make a kind of caricature.
Yeah.
And it was not his case. He was like a lawyer of the part, you know. So he came with a part of humanity, of fragility, and it was shocking because when you knew what was the character, it was interesting.
So, and it is interesting to think about. We've talked a little bit about the casting now, and how how the actual survivors wanted to be cast.
Yes.
Right. So I'm just thinking through, you know, the elements of this film that make it both a kind of docufiction or a film drawn from reality. It could have been a documentary. It wasn't. And I'm just thinking also about then, you know, how you had to conceive of certain basic elements of filmmaking, like montage, like editing. The most basic principle, aside from découpage or shot scale, and mise en scène, because this film, in telling the story of these three principal men, you go, and from Paris to Lyon, you know, you have to do things so economically, and I find this film to be so. It's just so elegant in juggling a very complex set of places, of characters, and of shifts in the narrative.
The structure of the film
Structure.
is very new, actually, because it's not usual to see a character disappearing after 45 minutes, you know.
Yes.
Usually you stay with the character during all the film.
Absolutely.
So it was the challenge of this of the script, you know, this relay race, to change of character and to I didn't know if the audience would be able to identify to the second character, to the third character, how they will support to lose the first one. So I didn't know, actually, you know.
Right.
It's always a risk when you make a film. You don't have all the keys. You don't know how it will work. And because I think the actors are very good enough, you can so the work in the script and during the editing was to give the opportunity to the audience to be very close, to identify easily to the character, to empathize with the character very fast. You know, for Emmanuel, when he arrives at the end, you know, after 1 hour and 30 minutes,
Yes.
the actor has to be perfect, and you have to recognize something and to be touched at the first minutes when you see him. So it was the challenge of his construction, because
Yes.
I didn't have in mind some other films, you know, with
Yeah.
this kind of construction. because usually it's you tell in parallel different stories,
Exactly.
and in this case, I wanted to try something else.
So it's not parallel, it's almost circular in the sense that we do come back.
Yes, they come
There are
back after.
waves, but you're
Yes,
absolutely right. When you
yes,
first see the film and Alexandre disappears,
yes,
it's a little bit, it feels new. It feels like a new kind of structure,
yes.
an
And actually,
unfamiliar structure.
if we wouldn't have found the money to produce the film, the idea was to make a series,
Ah,
and
I see.
each episode
Interesting.
focus on one character.
Do you think you'll try this kind of construction as a base for another film? I mean, does this structure
It
seem
depends on the story,
depends on the story?
The structure arrive after the story.
So two things, the intimacy that you create with the survivors is in large part due to the close-ups. There are a lot of close-ups in this film. Um, what do you think about that comment?
It's possible, yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
I agree too. I mean,
I don't intellectualize my mise en scène. I try just to find the right place for the camera, and very often it's instinct. I follow my instinct,
sure.
and the fact I'm behind the camera, I'm the cameraman.
Okay.
So I move around the actors, and I find very fast the place where I want to watch the faces.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, one more question, then maybe we watch a clip, because knowing that you're behind the camera is really important. So, the other question, I'm saying close-ups are really important. The editing is really important, and the clip I want to watch though is a moving camera.
Okay.
But before we do that, I wanted to ask you about the lighting, because this film, in terms of your oeuvre, I mean, there's a lot of attention to mise en scène, costuming, color, sound. A lot of films there's a lot going on, and this film is very sober, of course, in tone, and it has to be. But the parts of mise en scène, or those parts of the decor and the parts of everything that's in the frame, as we say, is for me all about the lighting. Um, did you have any
The light of God.
the light of God? I mean,
It's a real light. Huh?
it is. Is it
It's
real
real
light? It's
light.
not. Yeah.
We tried with the DP who comes from Belgium to make something very simple, and especially in the faire des clairs obscurs. I don't know how to say that in English. Clair obscur.
Obscure.
Clair obscur.
So no. It's the painterly term. It's the chiaroscuro.
Voilà.
Chiaroscuro. And actually, this was when I watched it last night. That's exactly what I thought. I thought of Vermeer. I thought of these paintings with
Yes.
these deep, dark zones. So here, for example, is a great still where we have just some natural light shot. And you shot this in Belgium, no? In churches? Or not?
No,
Paris?
this was in Paris.
Okay.
It was in a church in Paris. But the DP used a lot of smoke.
Ah.
It's something I didn't, I'd never work on that. I know the Americans do that a lot. They put some smoke everywhere, and that gives this
It's like a
out of
texture.
focus, behind the character.
So it's a-
It can be beautiful, especially when you shoot in digital, because in
Yes.
digital it's too clean, it's too sharp.
Yes, yes.
So it gives the feeling you can have with a pellicule.
Yes,
with
film,
35
with
millimeters.
celluloid.
Yes, with celluloid.
Yeah, so it's like this, almost like the dust, old dust. Can we
But
see
sometimes
another-
I thought there was too much smoke. I said, stop the smoke.
Can we see the next image, please? There's a beautiful shot of Emmanuel. Again, this backlit. I find that a motif of backlighting.
Yes.
Being, again, that creates this chiaroscuro, that creates the darks against the light.
And he's behind the window,
Yes, exactly. Next slide, please. Here, perfect example of that. Of
Clair
that.
obscur.
Yes, yes. And also this almost silhouette. They almost come out to be. And the next slide, please. Okay, great. So that's more of a.
It's more realistic.
Yeah.
Things are changing. They are creating the association. So it's more realistic, yes.
Yeah, and so it's a clean sort of overall light. This is a good.
It's in a hospital.
Okay.
Because the character on the right is a doctor.
So this is a good slide maybe to watch the second clip, I think, that we have of the press conference, because now it's the thought will be about the moving camera. There's a lot of editing, close-ups, but then this is a very dramatic scene where you put the camera into motion. I can't remember if it's a pan or a tracking shot, so you can tell us or we can look and see. I think we should see it. And then after that, I think I'll ask you to respond, but we'll open up for questions and I will start engaging with our virtual attendees.
Nous prenons conscience que cette affaire de pédophilie s'annonce être d'une ampleur effroyable. Des enfants ont été brisés, des familles se sont désunies, des croyances religieuses bouleversées. Au vu de ce constat accablant et de l'irresponsabilité dantesque de la plus haute hiérarchie du diocèse de Lyon, nous voudrions poser 3 questions. Monseigneur Barbarin, pourquoi le tribunal ecclésiastique n'a pas été saisi pour le jugement du père Prénat, vu le nombre de plaintes reçues par le diocèse? Monseigneur Barbarin, depuis quand avez-vous connaissance que le père Bernard Prénat est un pervers pédophile? Monseigneur Barbarin, depuis quand le Vatican a-t-il connaissance que le père Bernard Prénat est un pédophile? Au nom des victimes, de leurs parents, de leurs enfants, de vos fidèles, des prêtres innocents salis par cette affaire, des citoyens français, des laïcs, du clergé, mais aussi bien de la société en général, nous vous sommons de répondre publiquement à ces 3 questions. Le monde entier vous regarde.
It's interesting. I remembered a longer shot. Maybe
It's not that?
it might be this, but in the
No?
sense that I remember something a little bit different at the beginning, that there was a longer pan, but we did see it.
No, it's not here.
Well,
Yes, the first shot. Yes.
First shot, but I
Yes, but
remember
it's not
perhaps
here.
a shot before the sequence. Anyway,
I don't remember.
what?
But
Yeah.
you know, when you see this clip, you have the feeling it's an American movie. Too much music, no?
Well, what
Too
about?
emotional.
I was
no?
going to ask you about
I
that.
feel
I-
I feel bad, no? It was not a good choice.
I was actually going to ask you about that.
No,
choice,
I think
because it's
it
very-
works when you see all the film.
Yeah.
But when you see only this clip, you think, what is it? No?
Oh, yes, I think it
Of-
it feels more
It feels a little bit too much.
melodramatic
Too
than
melodramatic, no?
than the film
Sorry.
in isolation. Well, but the music though, we could talk about the music, but anyway, just to go back to this idea of the moving camera and the still camera,
You know, it's a film about la parole.
about speech,
About the speech, you know, so the mise en scène is close to la parole. I try each time to give the opportunity to hear the words, you know. So that means
you cut out.
oui. Donc that means to be behind, you know, and not to make too many effects in terms of mise en scène and découpage and all these
Right.
kind of things.
Okay, so that's a really interesting point, to open up the discussion, that in order to bring the speech and what the people have to say,
Yes.
that is really what drives so much of the film, that you don't want to distract with too
Yes. Yes, I'm very focused on the speech, and it's a lesson of Romer, because Romer is really the director of speech, you know, and very often in his films, people have many speech, and the acts
The
don't
act.
follow the words.
Yeah.
So it's the same idea in the film.
Romerien.
Of course, yes.
I see more and more. Okay, I think we'll take a first few questions from this audience before I go to the audience at Wayne State University and University of Illinois. Questions from this audience? Yeah.
Thank you for being with us today. I really enjoyed your movie last night. Yes. And although your movie focuses on male characters, I found was a mystery in the representation of female characters. And I was wondering it was an influence of Piala's movie, or if you had been influenced by any other
In this
movie on
In this
Catholicism.
movie?
Yes, especially when there is the confession of the wife of, is he Alexander?
Yes.
And I was wondering if it was mystery that comes from the fact that women are always, at stake. The lack of ordination in Catholic Church is something that is not talked about a lot. So I was wondering if this mystery, even in mother's characters, in fact, I thought that it was a mystery that those mothers would not go ahead and try to find out a little more about their children. So I was wondering if Piala had been influential to you in this movie, or maybe Boisson, even though they both focused on male characters. But I had in mind Mouchette especially.
Yes, I was a big fan of Maurice Pialat. I made my maîtrise of cinema on Maurice Pialat at university. Master of degree on Maurice Pialat, so he's a director I know very well. Actually, the part of the women are very important in this story. When I met the survivors, they explained me how much the wives, the mothers were important for them, for the fight. And I was very moved when I met Alexander's wife, who told me, I've got a secret to tell you, because I was asking her, how did you support your husband during all this suffer, all the problems he had? And she said, I'm going to tell you a secret nobody knows, but I was abused myself. And I was very moved. She told me that, and I asked her, could I use that for the film? Because it's very important to understand that your couple is based on this abuse. And she accepted to do that. And so it was very touching. But I don't know if I answer to your questions. Yes.
Maybe one more question from this audience right now? Yeah.
Ah.
Okay, one moment. I'm sorry. We've got a question
Okay.
back there. We'll come back to you. Sorry.
Okay. You said that at the beginning you wanted to do a documentary, but the people who were the victims of the priest did not want that. So you decided to make a fiction. So did you take this opportunity to explore other themes, like personal themes? I don't know. Add something to the reality.
I didn't need to add anything, because sometimes reality is stronger than fiction. All what I discovered during the interviews were so strong. I had too much material actually, so I have to choose on what I wanted to focus. And the idea was really to focus on the families. It's really the subject of my film. I wanted to show that a child abuse is a ticking time bomb who damage all the family. So it was really my idea.
I'm just want to say thank you so much, because I probably the youngest one here, because I'm only 18.
How old
so
you are?
I'm 18.
Okay.
Yeah. So I first time watched your film, Young and the Beautiful, when I was only like 14.
Ah.
My parents didn't know, so.
Okay.
But I just want to say thank you so much, because you're the one like inspiring me, and I'm gonna be studying college for film just because of you. I just want to say
Thank you.
I love it so much.
Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you so much. So I know that the weight of the new wave is heavy, because people want to know who else you're influenced by. Let me just ask you a question from Wayne State University, and they're asking you about Jacques Demy.
Yes.
And this director. And the question is Demy also important to you because he too was interested in questions of gender, sexuality, and otherness, in the sense of being queer or being other?
Yes. But I'm not sure I was so much inspired by Jacques Demy. I love his movies, I'm very interesting. He was the only one who made very good musical in France, in the tradition of American musical of the 50s and 40s. But I'm a fan of him, but I can't say, maybe you can find some connections between us. But I never had him in mind when I made maybe a film like some people made some links with Eight Women because there were some kind of musical in the film. But actually, you know, in Eight Women, it was a film, a meta film about cinema, about the French cinema, about the French actresses, and of course, because I had Catherine Deneuve in the film, people made the link. And I remember when Potiche was released in Japan, they changed the title. It was called Les Parapluies du Bonheur, the umbrellas of happiness. So they made the link with Jacques Demy, but it was not my choice at all.
And maybe Varda.
Uh,
Bonheur, le bonheur.
Yes, maybe. Yes, that's true. Yes, but I didn't have that in mind when I made
No,
the
and
film.
again, I mean, this is, I think.
But very often the Japanese change all the title.
Okay.
I don't know if there are some Japanese here.
So another question, this time coming from the University of Illinois. There's question. I think there are two questions here, but I'll try to kind of condense them. This one question reads: can you say more about the tension between wanting to articulate the social impact of this particular issue while avoiding explicit portrayals of the abuse? And at what stage did you make that decision? So I think the question is really about wanting to be explicit, but also knowing that you can't, of course, by law.
It's about the flashbacks.
It's about the
film.
flashbacks. This is about the
Yes.
flashbacks.
It was a big deal, a big questions we had with the chief editor, the editor chief, I don't know, chief editor. Do we need these flashbacks or not? For me, it was impossible to shoot the abuse, you know, it was impossible to represent that. But at the same time, speaking with the survivors, I realized, they told me very often, people didn't understand why we didn't escape.
Right.
Why we accepted to go to the office of the priest, why we didn't move, why we were paralyzed.
Right.
And it's something very important when you're abused, you know. As a child, you don't understand what's happening. You trust the adult. And your cerveau,
your
brain doesn't work, you know, at this moment because you trust the person in front of you. He's got power. Is someone you respect, and suddenly it's like your brain stop. You know, you don't think anymore, and you are tetanized, paralyzed. So I wanted to show the circumstances, and when you speak with psychologue, they say. It's very strange because children just after being abused are able to play like if it didn't happen, you know.
Right.
So I wanted to show that in the flashbacks.
When I find some of those, especially the one with Emmanuel,
Yes.
in the photo lab, it's
Yes.
almost still. I mean, it's as though there is no movement, and that
Yes.
little actor just, and so you convey that kind of brain freeze, if you will.
Yes, and it's up to you to imagine. And it was very disturbing because when I showed the films to some other survivors, one woman said to me, "Why did you show the scene when the priest did that and that?" And I said, "But it's not in the film, but it was in her head." So it was, so you realize the power of cinema, you know, like the Polanski's movie, Rosemary's Baby. Everybody has the feeling to have seen the baby.
Right.
And this woman had really seen the scene she had lived, actually.
I see. That's interesting. I mean, that opens up into a lot of other questions about what does it mean to ask an audience to imagine things like this, right? So explicitly.
It's something I like as when I'm a spectator. When I like a movie, I like to have the freedom to judge by myself. I don't like when the director say to me, it's black and white, it's good, it's evil. You know, I like to feel free in front of a film. So I try to give this opportunity to the audience in front of my own movie. I try. It doesn't work every time. But I like when there is this kind of window to give you the opportunity to exist in front of the film and to have the feeling to have a link with
To have a
with the
link
film.
or not. I mean,
Yes.
you could, yeah. Is there another question from this audience? Oh, wait, hold on one moment, sir.
You have this movies, Young and Beautiful, and this one. In one, you show prostitution, which is socially very negative perceived and linked sometimes to trafficking of and so on. Here you have a priest abuse, which society try not to see. So with prostitution, when you show it, it's voluntarily, but very poorly understood. So society is very negative about this. But priest abuse, society try to hide basically, and only these people try to open it. So how you kind of explain this, and what do you think about prostitution and generally after making this movie? Young and
Do you want me
beautiful.
to reframe the question? Bah, d'une part, le film Jeune et jolie, c'est très explicite. C'est-à-dire, vous montrez les actes des prostitutions, de prostituées, de la femme qui se prostitue. Et c'est très explicite, c'est très. Alors que vous pouvez pas montrer, montrez pas.
It's two different things, you know. In Jeanne et Jolie, it's the choice of this girl. Of course, the society is behind her, you know. I don't know if it's a real choice, but she wants to feel her freedom, you know, and to live this experience. I don't judge it, and I tried in the film to show not the how to say that. It's le côté glauque, enfin
The sort of
the
dark
dark side
side,
of the
yeah.
prostitution. But it was important to show that in the case of this film. In this one, it was impossible for me to show the scenes because it's not the choice of the children, you know. It would have mean to be in the point of view of the pedophile. And it's something I didn't want to make. But I can understand a director maybe wants to show that. But for me, it was not possible. It's personal. But it's a question of ethic too, I think.
Well, this is
I didn't want to eroticize,
eroticize.
you know. In Jeanne et Jolie, there is a kind of erotization because I think it's a reality in our society. Young girls are very always everywhere. There is a kind of focus on the sexuality of the young girls. So
But this is a really interesting segue, provides an interesting segue to this next question from Truman State University. How do you find the balance between traditional entertainment value, and they have quotes around this, and social commentary? So this is, I think, an interesting triangulation between a film about prostitution and its relationship to entertainment value, or, you know, pedophilic priests and entertainment value. I mean, this balance between making popular films for big audiences.
you never know it will be a film for big audience. You know, for
That's
example, this one I didn't want it would be successful.
Yeah.
8 Women, you know, it was a nightmare to shoot. It was very hard. Everybody was waiting for a disaster, and the film was a big hit.
Yeah.
So, of course, when you make a comedy, you can imagine that people will come more easily to see your film. But there is no law, you know. Each time it's a different experience. It's a prototype of film each time.
But maybe I'll push the question a little bit further. How do you think of, when you're making a film, do you, I mean, on the one hand, I want to ask you, do you want it to be successful? Because this is a way of saying.
No. I don't want when people come to see my films.
But this is getting to the
No, I want, yes.
right?
I don't want to seduce, you know. I want to touch people, but I try to give them the opportunity to think in front of the film. Entertainment is not a bad thing for me, you know. Sometimes, as a spectator, I like to see easy movie, you know, just to have pleasure, not to think anymore to my problems. You know, it's part of the cinema. You know, I don't put a wall between these kind of things. But I think to my pleasure first, and to the pleasure of the audience too, of course.
Well, this is interesting because we're unpacking.
I don't want you to suffer in front of my movies. Maybe some suffer a lot, but it's not my goal.
But it's interesting to think that you're not thinking about entertainment, and yet entertainment is complicated. You know, it's not.
Why?
Well,
yes.
I guess it's not that complicated. Well, in the sense that you're saying that it's not just about not thinking, you know,
No, but
and so the
you know, I
question.
think the best director who was able to mix entertainment and serious things was Hitchcock.
Mhm,
But he was not considered in the
mhm.
50s and 60s. He was just an entertainer,
He was right.
and
He
it
did,
was
you
it
know.
was a bad way to judge him.
Mhm,
But you realize his films were very profound about human being and very complex.
absolutely.
So it's an ideal for me.
And I think the question here about, you know, these dark topics. You know, how is a young woman's decision to become a prostitute? You know, we could look to Buñuel. There are other filmmakers who've
Yes.
taken on this topic, but I think the question is
It's
asking about, you know, why is this entertainment? Is it not? And what's the balance between
I
taking up
don't
a
actually. I don't ask me this kind of questions. I just follow my instinct, and I'm interested in complex situations. And in the case of Jeanne et Jolie, it was so interesting to follow this girl, to try to understand the mystery of of her behavior. You know, because she was very mysterious for me, and I wanted, you know, like a scientist to try to understand how she, why does she behave like this. I don't have the answer, and I
Right.
think that's why the film is very disturbing, because there is no judgment, you know, and that's why some people hated the film, because they like to leave the cinema with something clear, and it was not clear at all,
Mm-hmm.
because it was not for me too, and it was
Right.
the idea of the film. So of course it can be disturbing, but I think some people like that in movies.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think people don't like to see social subjects or subjects that are more difficult.
It
Like
depends the way it's how
the
it's
president
told.
of the channel of uh,
Yes, Canal
Canal
Plus,
Plus.
Monsieur Bolloré.
Oui. There was a question here in the audience, I believe. Oh, right there.
Thank you. So my question is regarding to the title of the movie by the Grave Scout, and this is a direct quote from the press. When
From the Cardinal.
we are from the Cardinal, and I'm wondering like why is this title? I think it's kind of conveys an ambiguity of what happened in the last, but when by the grace of God can be interpreted from the both sides. It's for the Catholic, for the Alexander. It is by the grace of God that he found the temporal peace, and then it is only on the other side that by the grace of God, the printer got punished. It's just like a lot of ambiguities
Yes.
focusing on the title. So I wonder what's your intention behind this?
My intention was all the question you said. So it's perfect. No, it was obvious for me to use these words, which are the real words of the Cardinal. And in France, actually, by the grace of God, should be translated, thank God, in a certain way. Maybe it's more usual, you know. Grâce à Dieu in French. We have decided to say by the grace of God because
Grâce à
it's
Dieu,
more.
thankfully, thank God we arrived.
Dieu merci. Vous voyez,
Yeah,
c'est
Dieu
la
merci.
différence entre Dieu merci et grâce à Dieu. Bon, qu'est-ce que je disais?
The title,
Yes.
the
So,
dialogue.
so it was obvious. It's the real words of the cardinal, and it's very representative of the problem of the church. You know, they use the justice system to protect themselves, and so I had no choice. But when we shot the film, we didn't give the title. You know, we lied about the title because these words are very famous in France. And if we would have said the film is called By the Grace of God, everybody in Lyon would have known it's about the Cardinal Barbarin. So it wouldn't have been possible to shoot in the city.
And so, in fact, when you were shooting in Lyon, you called it
Alexander.
Alexander.
And it was a story, a friendship between two men, like a film by Claude Sauté.
But I think what's fascinating and very beautiful is one of the first titles you came up with, which was The Crying Man.
Yes, because first I wanted to focus only on Alexander, you know. But when I made all the research, when I discovered the press conference of Barbarin, it was obvious to use this title.
And I think it's so interesting that it doesn't emerge until the end. And it's, toward the end of the film. I mean, how I'm trying to think when exactly the discourse of Barbarin happened, when he
In
says grâce à Dieu.
2016.
No, I mean in the film. When it
It
happens,
was, it's at the end of the film,
it's
maybe?
quite toward the end of the film.
Yes, yes.
And it really, so I love this question too, because it's this moment that really, it has amplitude.
Yes, because Barbarin has understood he made a big mistake, and he made again a new mistake using these words, but he, he doesn't understand, I think, what he's saying, but he's very well, il est très mal conseillé par ses avocats.
He does not get good advice from his lawyers.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and I mean too that moment in the film narratively, just it sort of has this amplitude where
Yes, because you have the parallel with Emmanuel. You have follow, the suffer of this character, and at the same time, you see this cardinal saying these stupid things, and the fact to have shared the intimacy of the survivor give more strength, to the situation, I think. And it was the idea. It's the only moment where there is a parallel between two different situations.
So I'll ask a question from the University of Illinois. The person wants to know, the person says, all creative projects have constraints of some kind. Can you tell us more about the kind of constraints that you have found most creatively fruitful in your work?
Constraint? What does it mean?
It's like
Contrainte?
des
Oui.
contraintes.
I didn't have so many constraints because I shot secretly the film.
But in general, I think in
In
your
general,
work.
yes, of course, but you use that. Sometimes it's good to have some constraint because it obliges you to create more, to find some good ideas. When everything is too easy, it's not good for creation. So sometimes it's something you can use. It has to be small constraints,
Right.
but sometimes it's helpful. Yes.
I mean, budgetary constraints can produce different kinds of shooting strategies or
Yes, you can find some
budgetary
different ideas and to be more clever. Yes.
Another question from this audience? Yes, over here.
You mentioned that there was a kind of distance when you were making films about women, and to make this film, it took some kind of perceived maturation that you felt you were mature enough to tackle subjects about men and masculinity. I'm just curious about that. What does that feel like? What does that feel like with the distance and like not having distance?
I think I was more lucid. When I made, I had the feeling making films about women give me more lucidity about them, to empathize more easily. With men, it was a relation of hate or love. It was complex, so it was more difficult for me. And maybe because I identify very often to women in movies. As a gay director, maybe sometimes I'm more touched by the character of women in films. So maybe it was easier. But now things are changing, so I don't know what will happen.
I'll ask another question, another few questions, and then I think we'll kind of bring this event to a close. So there are two questions here from Truman State. One asks what kind of advice that you would have for an aspiring filmmaker who wants to make films about that have social commentary, something like, or that have a relationship, I would imagine, to current events, and also what are the differences or the benefits between satire and serious narrative drama? And I take these to be companion questions. Is satire a good way to think about social commentary, or a
Yes,
vehicle
it can
for
be.
social commentary?
It can be. I could have made a comedy with the same topic, but I didn't want. It could have been funny. You could have fun about the cardinal, about the church, but it was not my intentions, because I wanted to show these characters like heroes, but it could have been possible. Everything is possible when you work about two events. In the case of this film, I wanted to be respectful because I thought their fight was powerful and strong, and it was for me important to share it with a big audience. So I don't have really an advice. The only advice is to be involved emotionally and to find a link to the story you want to tell. You know, for me it was this idea to show the fragility and the sensitivity of men. The fact to be brave, to speak out as a man, because we are not so used to see men speaking out about their suffer.
Which is also a really nice, I think, link to your question about also being in touch with where you are as a
Yes.
filmmaker and as a creative person who has different insights, different skills, different approaches. And
Yes. Each time you have to adapt, yes, to what you want to tell. And for me, you know, each time I try to find the right genre to tell the story which touch me.
well, I think this is a really good place to say thank you for
Thank you to you.
a very nice conversation and a very generous dialogue. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.